Welcome back, Wasteland Wanderers. Today's confession takes us to the frozen depths of the Great Lakes, where 17 warships became an icy tomb for 4,000 souls. This is the true story of the Great Lakes dead fleet told by the last man who watched them die. A 200-year confession from beyond the grave. Let's descend into the ice and uncover what really happened when nuclear winter turned America's inland seas into a graveyard. My name is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb. I served aboard the U.S. Resolute, a guided missile destroyer that became part of something the wasteland would one day call the Great Lakes Dead Fleet. If you're hearing this recording, if someone finally cracked open one of our hulls and found these holotapes scattered throughout the ship, then you need to understand what happened to us. Not the official story, not the sanitized version the Navy would have told. The truth. October 22nd, 2077. I remember that date better than my own birthday. We were 3 days into Operation Northern Shield, a joint naval exercise involving 17 vessels spread across Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. The Resolute, U.S. Triumph, U.S. Guardian, 3 destroyers, 2 cruisers, a submarine tender, support vessels, and the flagship, the carrier Lake Erie. Nearly 4,000 personnel total. Command had positioned us for what they called readiness drills. Looking back, I think someone knew what was coming. The morning air tasted wrong. I stood on the bridge at 0400 hours, watching ice crystals form on the windows despite it being late October. Our meteorologist, Petty Officer Richardson, kept recalibrating his instruments. He told me the temperature had dropped 11 degrees in 6 hours. The lake water temperature was falling too. Sensors showed thermal anomalies we'd never documented before. I should have known then. The world was already changing before the first missile ever launched. Captain Reeves called all department heads to the wardroom at 0630. His face looked carved from stone. He told us NORAD had elevated to DEFCON 2, Chinese submarine activity off the Pacific coast, high-altitude bombers spotted near the Bering Strait. He said we'd received orders to maintain radio silence and prepare for possible combat operations. But his eyes told a different story. He knew, somehow, he knew we were about to witness the end of everything. The bombs fell at 0942 Eastern. We were in the middle of Lake Michigan, approximately 80 nautical miles from Chicago. I was on the forward deck inspecting missile systems when I saw it. A flash on the horizon, brighter than the sun, then another, and another. The communications officer burst through the bridge door screaming that Chicago was gone. Detroit was gone. Milwaukee was burning. The electromagnetic pulse hit us 17 seconds later. Every electronic system on the ship went dead. Radar, sonar, communications, navigation, weapon systems, everything. We were blind. What happened next still haunts me. The other ships in our formation started firing flares. Emergency signals. The U.S. Triumph, our sister destroyer 3 miles to port, launched every flare they had. I could see people on her deck through binoculars. They were screaming, pointing. I followed their gaze and saw the mushroom clouds rising over the shoreline. Dozens of them. The entire western shore of Lake Michigan was being systematically destroyed. Captain Reeves tried to restore emergency communications. Our chief engineer, Lieutenant Davis, managed to get auxiliary power to critical systems using manual overrides. But when we finally got the radio working, all we heard was static and scattered fragments of dying transmissions. A Coast Guard station on the northern shore broadcast for 11 minutes before going silent. They described the sky turning black. They described the water beginning to freeze. They described something else too, something that terrified me more than the nuclear strikes. The weather changed in minutes. The temperature plummeted. Snow began falling, not gentle flakes, thick, heavy sheets of radioactive snow that stuck to everything it touched. The lake water temperature dropped 18 degrees in the first hour. Our hull thermometers registered ice formation on the surface within 90 minutes of the first strikes. We were watching nuclear winter arrive in real time. Captain Reeves made a decision that would seal our fate. He ordered the fleet to converge at a predetermined rally point, a deep water section of the lake, approximately 40 miles from the current shoreline. His reasoning was sound. If the coastal facilities were destroyed, if the radiation levels were lethal on shore, our only chance of survival was to stay mobile on the water and wait for rescue. 17 ships turned toward the rally point. Only 9 made it. The U.S. Guardian hit something underwater. A thermal shock fracture in the lake bed, we theorized later. Her hull was breached in 3 sections. She went down in 12 minutes, taking 217 souls with her. The submarine tender USAS support developed engine failure. Her crew abandoned ship and transferred to nearby vessels. The civilian support craft simply disappeared. We never found them. And the carrier U.S. Lake Erie, our flagship, reported critical radiation exposure to her crew. Over 900 personnel exhibiting symptoms of acute radiation sickness within 6 hours. I volunteered for the first shore reconnaissance mission. 24 hours after the bombs fell, Captain Reeves chose 6 of us. We took the Resolute's rigid inflatable boat and headed for what used to be Sheboygan, Wisconsin. The radiation counter started clicking the moment we approached the shoreline. By the time we beached, it was screaming. The city was gone, not damaged, gone, just foundations and twisted metal. The snow was black. Actually black. And it was still falling. The temperature was -8 degrees Fahrenheit. In October, in Wisconsin, we found survivors in a basement shelter 4 blocks inland, 16 people, mostly radiation burned. They'd been caught outside when the bombs fell. They told us the fires had burned for 3 hours before the temperature dropped so fast, the flames literally froze. They described watching the lake begin to ice over. They described seeing ships in the distance, our ships, and praying we'd rescue them. We couldn't. Our medical facilities were already overwhelmed. We took their names, promised to send help. We never made it back. The ice formed faster than any natural process we'd ever documented. Within 72 hours, the surface of Lake Michigan developed a sheet of ice 3 feet thick in places. Our destroyers could break through it, but the effort consumed massive amounts of fuel, and our fuel was finite. Captain Reeves calculated we had enough to operate for 6 weeks at combat readiness, maybe 8 if we conserved. After that, we'd be dead in the water, literally. The nuclear winter intensified. The temperature continued dropping, -15, -20. The snow never stopped. Our meteorologist said the particulate matter in the atmosphere from the nuclear fires was blocking sunlight across the entire continent. He predicted the cold would last for years, maybe decades. I remember the exact moment he said that. I remember the silence in the wardroom. The realization settling over all of us like a burial shroud. The other ships began experiencing critical systems failures. The U.S. Triumph lost her reactor coolant system. The U.S. Victory reported hull integrity issues from the ice pressure. The Lake Erie's crew was dying. Radiation sickness, hypothermia, despair. Her captain requested permission to beach his ship and evacuate. Captain Reeves denied the request. There was nowhere to evacuate to. The shoreline was a radioactive wasteland. The temperature was lethal. The only shelter was the ships themselves. Day 7. The ice was 6 feet thick. Our destroyers couldn't break through anymore. We were trapped. 17 vessels, nearly 3,000 surviving personnel, frozen in the middle of Lake Michigan like insects in amber. Captain Reeves called a fleet-wide conference. Each ship sent representatives. We met aboard the Resolute. The other captains looked like ghosts. They told stories that made my blood cold. Suicides, radiation deaths, crew members simply walking out onto the ice and disappearing. The Lake Erie had lost over 400 personnel. The Guardian survivors, packed onto smaller vessels, were dying from exposure. Then, Lieutenant Davis revealed something that would change everything. Before the Great War, the Resolute had been selected for a classified research program. Deep in our cargo hold, secured behind triple-locked hatches, were 8 experimental cryogenic preservation chambers. part of a Navy project called Deep Sleep. The official purpose was to test long-duration spaceflight technology, but Davis had read the real specifications. These chambers could keep a human being in suspended animation for decades, maybe longer, maybe indefinitely. Captain Reeves understood immediately. We all did. If rescue wasn't coming, if the nuclear winter lasted as long as predicted, if the radiation levels remained lethal. The chambers were our only chance, not for everyone. There were 8 chambers, nearly 3,000 personnel. The math was cruel and simple. Most of us would die. A few might survive to see whatever world existed after the winter ended. The captain made the hardest decision I've ever witnessed. He ordered a lottery. Every crew member's name went into a physical draw. 8 names would be selected. Those 8 would enter the chambers. The rest would maintain the fleet as long as possible. When the fuel ran out, when the supplies were exhausted, when the situation became untenable, the remaining crew would make their own choices. Stay or leave, live or die. My name wasn't drawn. Neither was the captain's. The 8 selected were a cross-section of our personnel: 2 engineers, 1 medical officer, 2 communications specialists, 1 navigation officer, 1 weapons specialist, 1 ordinary seaman who'd only been in the Navy for 6 months. The youngest person on the ship, 19 years old, she cried when they told her, not from joy, from guilt. We prepared the chambers over the next 48 hours. Lieutenant Davis worked around the clock calibrating the systems. The cryogenic process was supposed to be gradual: controlled temperature reduction, cellular preservation, suspended metabolism. But we'd never tested it on humans. Not truly. The research animals had survived, mostly. The margins of error were terrifying, but the alternative was certain death. The night before we activated the chambers, I sat with the 8 selected personnel. They asked me what they should do if they woke up and found the fleet destroyed, if they emerged into a world where everyone they knew was dead. I told them to find a way to document what happened here, to make sure someone knew the truth, that we didn't just disappear, that we fought to survive until we couldn't fight anymore. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. The activation sequence began at 0600 hours on October 30th, 2077. 1 week after the world ended, I stood in the cargo hold and watched them climb into the chambers. The young seaman went last. She looked at me and asked if I thought rescue would ever come. I lied. I told her yes. The chambers sealed. The temperature inside dropped to minus 196 degrees Celsius. Nitrogen vapor filled the compartments. Their vital signs slowed, heart rate dropping, brain activity reducing, and then nothing. 8 people, suspended between life and death, waiting for a future that might never arrive. The rest of us returned to our duties, maintaining the ships, monitoring radiation levels, watching the ice grow thicker. The nuclear winter showed no signs of ending. The temperature stabilized at minus 30 degrees. The snow continued falling. Black snow, radioactive snow, snow that would contaminate the Great Lakes for centuries. 2 weeks later, the U.S. Victory's reactor failed. Her crew transferred to the Resolute and the Triumph. 3 days after that, the Lake Erie went dark. Her remaining crew, less than 200 personnel, tried to reach us across the ice. 17 made it. The rest disappeared into the radioactive blizzard. I spoke with one of the Lake Erie survivors. He told me the carrier was a tomb, bodies in every compartment. The radiation had been too intense. They died in waves, first the ones caught on deck during the strikes, then the ones working in the reactor spaces, then everyone else, slowly, painfully, inevitably. Captain Reeves established a schedule: essential personnel only, rotating shifts to conserve body heat, rationed food, rationed water. We calculated we could survive for 3 months before our supplies ran out. Maybe 4 if we were disciplined. then we'd face the choice: try to reach the shoreline through radiation and cold, or stay with the ships and die in our bunks. Neither option offered hope, just different variations of the same ending. I started recording these logs on day 20. I'd found a supply of holotapes in the communications room, outdated technology even in 2077, but they worked without ship's power. I could record manually, document what we were experiencing. Maybe someone would find them. Maybe someone would understand. We hadn't just died. We'd fought. We'd tried to survive. We'd made impossible choices trying to preserve something of humanity. The temperature dropped to -40, then -45. The ice around our hulls was now 15 feet thick. We were completely encased. No way in, no way out. The ships themselves were becoming our tombs, but tombs built of steel and determination. We still had heat from the emergency reactors. We still had light. We still had each other. And that meant something. Even here, even now, even at the end of everything. Day 37. The Resolute's reactor power dropped below 50% capacity. Lieutenant Davis reported the reactor was operating beyond safe parameters. The extreme cold was affecting coolant circulation. He estimated we had 6 weeks before we'd need to initiate emergency shutdown procedures. After that, we'd have emergency batteries, maybe 72 hours of minimal power. Then, nothing but darkness and cold. The crew was changing, not physically, not yet, but mentally, psychologically. I saw it in their eyes, the realization settling in like ice forming on glass. We weren't going to be rescued. No one was. Coming. The world above, the world we'd known, the civilization we'd served, was gone, burned away in 2 hours of nuclear madness, and we were forgotten. Just 17 ships trapped in frozen water, slowly dying while the nuclear winter buried the continent under radioactive snow. Captain Reeves called another fleet conference on day 40. Only 5 ships could still generate enough power to send representatives. The others were going dark one by one, conserving what little energy remained for heating and basic life support. The meeting was brief, brutal. The captain of the U.S. Triumph reported his crew was down to 87 personnel. They'd lost 43 to radiation sickness in the past week alone. The medical officer from the Lake Erie, one of the 17 who'd made it across the ice, reported they had enough medical supplies for maybe 2 more weeks. After that, anyone who got sick would die without treatment. But the worst report came from the submarine tender US support, or what was left of her. She'd been abandoned early, her crew distributed among other vessels, but someone had gone back, scavenged supplies, and found something in her cargo hold that changed everything. The support had been carrying classified materials, weapons research. Specifically, she'd been transporting 4 experimental nuclear warheads designated Charlie Bravo 79. Each warhead had a yield of 200 kilotons, and they were armed. Still armed, sitting in a frozen cargo hold on an abandoned ship in the middle of Lake Michigan. Captain Reeves understood the implication immediately. So did I. We had a decision to make. The warheads represented both a threat and an opportunity. If they detonated accidentally, from ice pressure or structural failure, they'd vaporize what remained of the fleet. But they also represented something else, a choice. An ending we could control. If the suffering became too great, if the dying became too prolonged, we could choose to end it quickly. All of us, together. The captain ordered the warheads secured, triple-checked, made safe as possible given the circumstances, but he didn't order them disarmed. He left that option open. I think he knew, even then, that some of the crew might eventually choose it. Better a quick death than slow starvation or radiation poisoning. Better to go out in one final flash than to freeze in the darkness counting the hours until your heart stopped beating. Day 45. I made another trip across the ice, not to the shoreline this time, to the US Guardian's wreck site. She'd gone down in relatively shallow water, her superstructure still visible above the ice. I wanted to see if we could salvage supplies, fuel, medical equipment, anything. What I found instead was worse than anything I'd imagined. The Guardian hadn't sunk cleanly. She'd rolled as she went down, trapping crew members inside sealed compartments. The ice had formed around her before they could escape. I could see them through the portholes, frozen bodies, preserved by the extreme cold, still in their duty stations, still at their posts. Some had written messages on the bulkheads, messages to loved ones who would never read them, messages asking for forgiveness, messages describing their final hours as the water rose and the temperature dropped and the darkness closed in. I documented everything, took photographs with a manual camera, recorded their names. Someone needed to remember them. Someone needed to know they hadn't died instantly. They'd fought, they'd tried, they'd failed, but they'd tried. That had to mean something, even here, even in this frozen hell we'd inherited. When I returned to the Resolute, I found the crew gathered in the mess hall. Captain Reeves stood at the front of the room. His face looked older than I'd ever seen it. He announced that we'd received no communications from shore in over a month. No radio signals, no emergency broadcasts, no signs of organized rescue efforts. The shoreline monitoring stations we could still observe showed no lights, no smoke, no movement. The coastal cities were dead. The infrastructure was destroyed. Whatever survived the initial strikes had succumbed to the radiation and cold. Then he made an announcement that I knew was coming, but still hit like a physical blow. We were implementing survivor protocols, reducing the fleet to essential vessels only. The Resolute, the Triumph, and one other ship, the OS Valor, would remain operational. The others would be stripped of supplies and abandoned. Their crews would transfer to the remaining vessels. It was pure mathematics. 3 ships could support our remaining population longer than 17 ships. Resources were finite. Time was running out. We had to make hard choices. The consolidation took 3 days. It was the most heartbreaking thing I've ever witnessed. Sailors evacuating ships they'd served on for years, taking only what they could carry, leaving behind photographs, personal effects, pieces of their lives. The Lake Erie was the hardest. She'd been the flagship, the pride of the Great Lakes Fleet. Now she was just a frozen hull, radiation-soaked and lifeless. Her last crew members sealed the hatches and walked across the ice carrying bags of salvaged food and medicine. No one looked back. Looking back meant acknowledging what we'd lost, what we'd become. Day 53. The Resolute's population swelled to 412 personnel. We were packed into spaces designed for half that number. The ventilation systems couldn't handle the load. The air grew stale, recycled. People slept in shifts, hot bunking, 2 or 3 crew members sharing the same rack in rotation. Privacy became a luxury we couldn't afford. Dignity became something we remembered from the old world. Lieutenant Davis reported the reactor was operating at 30% capacity. The extreme cold was winning. No matter what we did, no matter how we adjusted, the systems, the temperature kept finding ways to leach our heat. He estimated 2 weeks before we'd need to shut down. I asked him what happened after that. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew. Without heat, without power, the ship would become our coffin. We'd freeze in the darkness like the crew of the Guardian, preserved for whoever found us, if anyone ever did. The radiation levels were changing too, not decreasing, increasing. Our sensors detected hotspots forming on the lake bed. We theorized that the nuclear strikes had fractured geological formations, uranium deposits, natural radioactive materials. They were leaking into the water. The lake itself was becoming contaminated, not just from fallout, from the earth opening up and bleeding poison into the depths. In another month, maybe 2, the water would be too contaminated to use, even with filtration. After that, we'd die of thirst before we died of cold. I checked on the cryogenic chambers on day 57. The 8 personnel inside remained stable, vital signs minimal but present, brain activity flatlined but not absent. They were alive, technically, suspended in a state between existence and oblivion. waiting for conditions that might allow revival, conditions that might never come. I envied them. They didn't have to watch this slow collapse. They didn't have to make these impossible decisions. They just slept, dreaming whatever dreams the frozen dead dream. Day 61. The US Triumph reported they were implementing final protocols. Their reactor had failed completely. They had 12 hours of battery power remaining. Captain Mitchell made the announcement himself over our communications link. His voice was calm, measured. He'd accepted his fate. His crew had voted unanimously. When the power died, they would open the outer hatches, let the cold in, die quickly rather than slowly. He asked Captain Reeves to document their choice, to make sure people knew they'd faced death with dignity. We listened on the radio as the Triumph died. It took 6 hours. The crew sang songs, shared stories, said goodbyes to loved ones who would never hear them. And then, at hour 12, Captain Mitchell ordered the hatches opened. The temperature inside the Triumph plummeted. The transmission quality degraded rapidly. But we heard them laughing, crying, praying, and then silence. The US Triumph went dark. 236 souls gone, frozen, preserved, dead. Captain Reeves held a memorial service the next morning. The entire crew of the Resolute gathered in the mess hall. We couldn't bury the Triumph's crew, couldn't even reach them, but we could honor them, remember them, acknowledge that they'd made a choice we might all face soon. The captain read their names, all 236. It took 40 minutes. Some crew members broke down, others stood silent. I just listened, burned those names into my memory. They deserved to be remembered. They all deserved to be remembered. Day 68. Our food supplies dropped below critical levels. We were rationing now, 1 meal per day. Barely enough calories to maintain body heat in the extreme cold. People were getting weaker, moving slower. The medical bay reported cases of scurvy, malnutrition, hypothermia despite the ship's heating. Our bodies were shutting down, giving up. The human machine could only run on fumes for so long before it stopped running altogether. I found a crew member in the forward berthing area on day 70, Petty Officer Richardson, the meteorologist who'd first noticed the temperature anomalies. He'd hanged himself from a pipe, left a note apologizing, said he couldn't watch anymore, couldn't document the death of the world. The note ended with calculations, mathematical formulas describing the progression of nuclear winter. His final estimate, the temperature would continue dropping for another 2 years, minimum. After that, maybe stabilization, maybe recovery. But it would take decades, centuries, for the atmosphere to clear, for normal weather patterns to return. If they ever did, if this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. Captain Reeves made an announcement on day 74. The Resolute's reactor would be shut down in 48 hours. We no longer had the resources to maintain it safely. We'd switch to emergency batteries, limited power, minimal heating, and when the batteries died, we'd face the same choice the Triumph faced: stay in the darkness and freeze, or walk out onto the ice and disappear into the radioactive blizzard. But the captain had another option: the cryogenic chambers. We had 8 people preserved, waiting. But the chambers themselves didn't require ship's power. They were self-contained, battery-operated with redundant systems. They could continue functioning even after the Resolute went dark. Even after we all died, the chambers could keep those 8 people alive, frozen, suspended, until conditions improved, until someone found them, until the nuclear winter ended and the world began again. Lieutenant Davis proposed something radical. We could modify the chambers, add more preservation units, not full cryogenic systems. We didn't have the technology for that, but cold storage. The temperature outside was minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to preserve organic matter indefinitely. We could use the ship itself as a freezer, seal sections, fill them with bodies, preserve the dead, create a record, physical evidence that we existed, that we tried. that we mattered. The captain approved the plan. We spent the next 2 days preparing, sealing compartments, organizing the dead from the previous weeks, recovering bodies from abandoned ships, creating a catalog, names, ranks, service records. We turned the US Resolute into a monument, a frozen memorial to the Great Lakes Fleet, to 4,000 personnel who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time when the world burned. Day 76, the reactor shutdown began. It was controlled, methodical. Lieutenant Davis walked us through each step, inserting control rods, reducing reaction rates, banking the nuclear fire that had kept us alive. The ship's temperature started dropping immediately. We gathered in the few remaining heated sections, crowded together, sharing body warmth, waiting for the end. I made my final log entry on day 79. The batteries were failing, the lights were dimming, the temperature in the ship had dropped to minus 20 degrees. People were dying, quietly, in their sleep. Hypothermia, starvation, despair. Captain Reeves was still alive, still giving orders, still maintaining discipline even as death closed in around us. He told me to record everything, make sure the logs survived, hide them throughout the ship, multiple redundancies, so someone someday would know the truth. The truth is simple. We didn't die heroes. We didn't die in combat. We just died, slowly, cold, hungry, forgotten, 17 ships trapped in ice, 4,000 souls abandoned by a world that destroyed itself. We were casualties of the Great War, not from bombs or radiation, from the aftermath, from the cold, from the nuclear winter that turned the Great Lakes into a frozen graveyard. I don't know if anyone will find this. I don't know if anyone survived to find it. But if you're hearing this, if you've discovered the dead fleet, then you need to understand, we're still here, frozen in the ships, preserved by the cold. We're not just wreckage, we're people. We were people, and we deserve to be remembered for more than how we died. The cryogenic chambers are in cargo hold 3, 8 people, still alive. Maybe, if the systems held, if the batteries lasted, if the universe showed mercy just once, check on them, revive them if you can. Let them tell their stories. Let them be witnesses to the end of the old world and the beginning of whatever world you've inherited. My hands are numb now. Can't feel the recording device. Can't feel much of anything. The captain is calling for final muster. One last roll call. We're going to say goodbye to each other. Then, we're going to seal the bridge. Preserve it. Make it a time capsule. Evidence. Proof. We existed. We mattered. We died trying to survive. To whoever finds this, remember us. Remember the Great Lakes dead fleet. Remember that we didn't give up until we had no choice left. And remember that somewhere in these frozen ships, 8 people might still be sleeping, waiting for rescue. Don't let them wake up to an empty world. Don't let them wake up alone. This is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, US Resolute. Final entry, day 79, end of log. But I didn't die on day 79. I need to be honest with you now, completely honest, because the logs I've been describing, the entries I recorded, they're real. They're scattered throughout the Resolute. You'll find them if you search hard enough, but I didn't die with the others. I couldn't. And that's the worst part of this confession. That's the truth I've been building toward, the secret that's haunted me for over 200 years. My name isn't Marcus Webb. Well, it is, but it's also not. Let me explain. I was the navigation officer on the US Resolute. That part was true, but I left out one critical detail. When they drew names for the cryogenic chambers, when they held that lottery on day 9, my name was drawn. I was one of the 8 selected. I was one of the ones who climbed into those chambers while 4,000 people stayed behind to die. And I've lived with that guilt every single day since. The chamber worked. All 8 chambers worked. We slept through the nuclear winter, slept through decades of cold and darkness, slept through the slow death of the Great Lakes Fleet. And when I finally woke up, When the chamber's automatic revival protocols activated after detecting improved atmospheric conditions, I emerged into a nightmare worse than anything I'd experienced during those 79 days. I woke up on March 14th, 2217, 140 years after the Great War. The chamber's internal chronometer told me the date. I didn't believe it at first, couldn't comprehend it. I'd closed my eyes in 2077 and opened them in a world I didn't recognize, a world that had forgotten me, forgotten all of us. The ship was exactly as we'd left it, frozen, preserved. The temperature inside the Resolute was still minus 30 degrees. The nuclear winter had ended decades ago, but the ship remained encased in ice. 15 feet of solid ice surrounding the hull. The Great Lakes themselves had partially frozen and thawed multiple times over the centuries, but this deep water section, this graveyard we'd chosen, had remained frozen. The dead fleet was still here, still waiting, still dead. I found the others, the 7 other chamber occupants. They were dead. The chambers had failed, not mine. Just theirs, some kind of cascade failure in the power systems. My chamber had been on a separate circuit, a redundancy. It kept functioning while the others slowly lost power. The occupants froze, really froze. Not suspended animation, just frozen, dead. Their bodies preserved but lifeless. I was alone. I spent 3 days exploring the Resolute, moving through corridors lined with frozen bodies. The crew had done exactly what Captain Reeves ordered. They'd sealed compartments, organized the dead, created a monument. I found the captain on the bridge, sitting in his chair, eyes closed, peaceful. He'd been the last one alive, the last one to seal the bridge and accept his fate. His final log entry was in his lap, a handwritten note. It said simply, "We tried. The other ships were the same. I crossed the ice, visited the Triumph, the Valor, the Lake Erie, all frozen tombs, all perfectly preserved. Thousands of bodies in duty uniforms, at their stations, in their bunks, in the mess halls. Some had died quickly, others slowly, but they'd all died together. A fleet suspended in time, a snapshot of humanity's final moments before the old world ended and the new world began. I found supplies on the Valor, radiation suits, emergency rations that had frozen but were still edible after thawing, a working radio transmitter with a manual power generator. I tried broadcasting, sent distress signals on every frequency, got nothing back but static. The world had moved on. Whatever civilization survived the Great War, it wasn't monitoring naval distress frequencies. It probably didn't even remember the Great Lakes Fleet existed. I spent 2 months living among the dead, cataloging, documenting, preserving. I recorded video logs using equipment from the ships, took thousands of photographs, created a database of every person who died here, every name, every face, every story I could piece together from personal effects and log entries. Someone needed to remember them, and since I was the only one left alive, that someone was me. But I couldn't stay. The radiation levels in the lake were still elevated, not lethal anymore, not like those first weeks, but chronic exposure would kill me eventually, and the supplies, even with 17 ships to scavenge, were finite. I needed to reach the surface, find out what remained of the world, find out if anyone else had survived. I left the dead fleet on June 2nd, 2217, walked across the ice carrying everything I could salvage, radiation suit, weapons, medical supplies, and the logs, all of them, every holotape, every written record, every piece of evidence that the Great Lakes Fleet had existed. I wasn't going to let them be forgotten. I wasn't going to let their sacrifice mean nothing. The shoreline was unrecognizable. Where cities had stood, only ruins remained, overgrown with mutated vegetation, contaminated by lingering radiation. The lake itself had receded, shorelines had changed, the geography was different. 140 years of environmental chaos had reshaped the entire region. I used pre-war maps from the ship and could barely recognize anything. I found my first survivors 3 days inland, a settlement built in the ruins of what might have been Green Bay. 30 people living in reinforced shelters, farming mutated crops, trading with other settlements. They looked at me like I was a ghost. I probably looked like one. Pale skin from years in cryogenic suspension, naval uniform from a military that no longer existed, speaking with an accent and vocabulary from before the world ended. I was a living fossil, a remnant of the old world walking among the new. They told me about the wasteland, about the radiation, the mutations, the factions, the Brotherhood of Steel, the raiders, the ghouls, the new societies that had emerged from the ashes. They told me the Great War had destroyed everything, that the United States no longer existed, that the old world was gone and would never return. They told me I was lucky to have slept through it, lucky to have missed the worst of the dying. Lucky. That's what they called me. Lucky. I've never felt lucky. I've felt guilty. Survivor's guilt multiplied by 4,000. Every person who died on those ships, every name in my database, every frozen face I photographed. They died while I slept. They suffered while I dreamed. They made impossible choices while I floated in chemical suspension waiting for a future they'd never see. How is that lucky? I spent the next 20 years wandering the wasteland, searching for other survivors from the fleet. I found a few, a handful who'd abandoned ship early, who'd tried to reach shore before the ice trapped the fleet. Most died of radiation exposure. A few survived long enough to join settlements, have children, build new lives, but they were scattered, broken. None of them wanted to remember. None of them wanted to talk about those 79 days we spent dying in the ice. But I couldn't forget. I carried the logs everywhere, protected them, preserved them, added to them, documented what I found. The settlements built on the bones of the old world, the mutated creatures roaming the wasteland, the radiation zones, the dead cities, all of it, everything. I became an archivist of the apocalypse, a witness to the end and what came after. I learned about the dead fleet's reputation around 2230. A raider gang operating near the lakeshore claimed they'd found the ghost ships, frozen vessels full of treasures, pre-war technology, weapons, supplies. They tried to salvage the wrecks, got as far as the outer ice before the radiation drove them back. The concentrations around the fleet were still too high, still lethal without proper protection. The ships remained sealed, untouchable, a graveyard protected by its own poison. Others tried over the years, scavengers, Brotherhood patrols, treasure hunters, all failed. The ice was too thick, the radiation too intense, the location too remote. The dead fleet became a legend, a ghost story. People claimed they could see the ships from shore on clear days, massive shadows under the ice. Some said the fleet was haunted, that you could hear voices on the radio, distress calls from sailors who'd been dead for centuries. They weren't wrong. I'd left automated transmitters running, broadcasting on loop, playing the final messages, the goodbyes, the prayers. Let the wasteland know we existed. Let them hear our voices even if they never found our bodies. I met a ghoul in 2242 in a settlement near Detroit, or what used to be Detroit. He'd been alive before the war, remembered the old world. We talked for hours. He asked me why I cared so much about the dead fleet, why I spent decades preserving logs and photographs of people who'd been dead for over a century, why I didn't just move on, build a new life, forget. I told him I couldn't forget, that I owed them, that I'd survived while they died, and the least I could do was make sure their stories didn't die with them. He understood. He was a ghoul. He'd watched everyone he loved grow old and die while he remained, preserved by radiation, cursed with immortality. We were both ghosts, both remnants, both trapped between the world that was and the world that is. Here's something you need to think about. If you were given the chance to survive while everyone around you died, would you take it? Would you climb into that chamber knowing thousands would freeze while you slept, or would you refuse? Stay with your shipmates, die together? What's the right choice? What's the moral choice? Because I've spent 200 years asking myself that question, and I still don't have an answer. I returned to the dead fleet in 2250, armed with better radiation protection, better equipment. I wanted to see it again, confirm it was still there, still preserved. The ice had thinned, climate change from the nuclear winter's end, but the ships remained, locked in frozen water, exactly as we'd left them. I boarded the Resolute, walked through corridors I'd walked before, saw the same frozen faces, the same preserved moment. Nothing had changed. Time had stopped for the dead fleet in 2077, and it would remain stopped forever. I updated the logs, added new entries, described the wasteland that had grown up around the lake, the settlements, the factions, the new world built on the old world's bones. I sealed the logs in waterproof containers, hid them throughout the ship, created a trail, clues, so anyone who found the fleet would know where to look, what to search for, how to understand what happened here. I'm telling you this story now because I'm dying, real dying, not suspended animation, not frozen preservation, actual death. I'm over 200 years old. The cryogenic process extended my life, slowed my aging, but it didn't stop it. I've lived far longer than any human should, far longer than I wanted to, and now my body is finally giving up, shutting down, accepting the death I should have faced in 2077. I came back to the dead fleet one final time, brought recording equipment, modern holotapes, technology that didn't exist in the old world. I'm recording this in the Resolute's wardroom, the same room where Captain Reeves announced we were trapped, where he told us rescue wasn't coming, where we made the decision to implement survivor protocols. I'm sitting at the same table, looking at the same frozen faces, and I'm telling you the complete truth, the whole story, everything. The 8 cryogenic chambers are still in cargo hold 3. My chamber is there too, empty now, but functional. The others failed, but they could be repaired, replaced, used again. The technology still works. The dead fleet isn't just a monument, it's a resource, a time capsule, a preserved piece of the old world waiting to be discovered. The ships contain more than just bodies. There are weapons, pre-war military technology, communications equipment, computers with intact databases, medical supplies, engineering schematics, everything a pre-war destroyer carried. Everything the Navy had in 2077. It's all here, frozen, preserved, waiting. The Brotherhood of Steel would kill for access to this fleet. Raiders would loot it for weapons. Settlers could salvage enough supplies to build entire communities. The dead fleet is valuable, dangerous, important, but more than that, it's proof. Proof that we tried, that we didn't give up, that 4,000 people faced the end of the world with courage and dignity. They didn't riot, didn't turn on each other, didn't abandon their principles. They maintained discipline, followed orders, supported each other, and when they finally died, they died as sailors, as warriors, as human beings refusing to let the apocalypse destroy their humanity. I'm leaving this recording in multiple locations throughout the ship: the bridge, the wardroom, the cargo hold with the chambers, the captain's quarters, the communications room, redundancy, multiple chances for discovery. Someone will find the dead fleet eventually. The ice won't last forever. The radiation will decay. And when someone finally boards these ships, when they walk through these corridors and see these frozen faces, I want them to understand what they're seeing. Not just wreckage, not just corpses, but people, real people who lived and died and deserve to be remembered. There's one more thing I need to tell you. One final truth that I've kept buried for 200 years. A secret that changes everything about the dead fleet. About why we were really out here. About what we were carrying. I lied earlier. Not about the deaths, not about the suffering. That was all real. But I lied about Operation Northern Shield. It wasn't a training exercise. It was never about readiness drills or naval exercises. We were out here for a different reason, a classified reason, and I'm the only one left who knows the truth. The East Resolute wasn't just a destroyer. We were a test platform. Before the Great War, the Navy had been developing something called the Poseidon Defense Network, a system of underwater nuclear silos hidden in the Great Lakes, secret launch facilities that could strike anywhere in North America or beyond. The idea was strategic depth. If the coastal bases were destroyed, if the land-based missiles were neutralized, we'd still have the Great Lakes arsenal, a hidden deterrent that China would never expect. We were mapping the locations, testing deployment systems. The 17 ships in our fleet weren't random. Each one had a specific role. The destroyers provided security. Cruisers carried surveying equipment. The submarine tender U.S. support wasn't just carrying those 4 warheads I mentioned. She was carrying 12 experimental weapons designed for underwater deployment. And the carrier U.S. Lake Erie wasn't really a carrier at all. She was a command and control platform, a floating bunker designed to coordinate the entire Poseidon network if war broke out. The network was nearly complete when the bombs fell, 17 underwater silos, each containing multiple warheads, each capable of launching independently or as part of a coordinated strike. The final installation was scheduled for October 25th, 2077, 2 days after the world ended. We were so close to having a weapon system that might have changed the outcome of the war, or made it even worse. I don't know anymore. I've had 200 years to think about it, and I still can't decide if the Poseidon network would have saved us or damned us. Here's what haunts me. Those silos are still out there, still functional. The warheads are still armed. The automated systems are still running, powered by nuclear batteries designed to last for centuries. I know because I've checked multiple times over the years. I've dove to the locations, verified the installations. The Poseidon network survived the Great War intact, untouched, unknown, waiting, and I'm the only one with the launch codes. They were stored in my chamber, encrypted files in the computer system. Part of my navigation role was to maintain the targeting data. When I woke up in 2217, when I accessed the chamber's computer, the files were still there, still accessible. 17 underwater silos, each with 6 warheads, 102 nuclear weapons sitting at the bottom of the Great Lakes, enough firepower to destroy what's left of North America, enough power to end the world a second time. I've never told anyone. Not the settlements, not the Brotherhood, not anyone, because I knew what would happen if they found out. They'd fight over it, kill for it, use it. The Brotherhood would claim the network in the name of preserving technology. The raiders would try to hold it for ransom. The various factions would go to war trying to control it. And in the end, someone would launch. Someone always launches. That's what the Great War taught us. When humans have the power to destroy, they eventually use it. So I've kept it secret, hidden the launch codes, destroyed the targeting data, made it as difficult as possible for anyone to activate the Poseidon network. But I couldn't disable it completely. I didn't have the technical knowledge, and even if I did, the systems are distributed, redundant, designed to survive attempts at sabotage. The best I could do was hide the truth and hope no one ever found it. But you're going to find it. Eventually. Someone will discover the dead fleet, board the ships, access the computers, find references to Poseidon, and they'll start asking questions. They'll start searching, and sooner or later, they'll figure it out. The Great Lakes contain a hidden nuclear arsenal, and whoever controls it controls the wasteland. That's why I'm recording this. Not just to tell you what happened to the fleet, but to warn you, to beg you. Don't activate Poseidon. Don't try to use those weapons. Disable them if you can. Destroy them if you must. But don't, under any circumstances, let them be used. We destroyed the world once with nuclear weapons. Don't let it happen again. I've marked the silo locations on maps hidden throughout the ship. Detailed coordinates, depth measurements, access codes for the external hatches, everything you'd need to find them and neutralize them. It's my final gift to the wasteland, my attempt to prevent the next apocalypse. Use the information wisely, or better yet, don't use it at all. Let the Poseidon network sleep. Let it rust away at the bottom of the lakes. Let it be forgotten along with the world that created it. I'm in the captain's quarters now. I've taken his seat. the same chair where Captain Reeves sat during those final days, where he made impossible decisions trying to save his crew. I've been sitting here for 3 hours, watching the frozen faces through the porthole, remembering their names, remembering their voices, remembering the 79 days we spent dying together. Except I didn't die with them. I slept. I survived. I've lived for 200 years while they remained frozen in this moment. And now, finally, I'm going to join them. Not in death, not exactly, but in preservation, in memory, in this ship that's become their monument. I've prepared one of the sealed compartments, set the environmental controls, gathered my logs and recordings. Everything I've documented over 2 centuries, I'm sealing it all here, in the Resolute, in the heart of the dead fleet, where it belongs, where it will be found, where the story will finally be complete. The radiation is worse than I thought. I didn't notice at first, too focused on recording, but my dosimeter is screaming now. The chronic exposure over the years, the recent dives to the Poseidon sites, it's caught up with me. Radiation sickness, the same thing that killed so many of the crew in those first weeks. Poetic, I suppose. I'm finally dying the same way they did, finally paying the price for my survival. My hands are shaking, vision blurring. The symptoms are progressing fast. Hours maybe, not days. The wasteland is finally claiming its debt. 200 years overdue, but claiming it nonetheless. I'm not afraid. I've lived long enough, seen enough, done what I needed to do. The logs are preserved, the warnings are recorded, the dead fleet story is told. My work is finished. I wonder what they'll think when they find me. Another frozen body among thousands. Nothing special, nothing remarkable, just another casualty of the Great War. They won't know woke up. Won't know I lived for centuries after everyone else died. Won't know I carried their stories across the wasteland like a burden I could never put down. I'll just be another name in the database, another face in the photographs, another sailor who died with his ship. Maybe that's how it should be. Maybe that's the ending I deserve. Not as a survivor, not as a witness, but as crew, as part of the fleet, as one of the 4,000 who were here when the world ended and stayed here when it began again. The dead fleet is my ship, my home, my tomb. I should never have left it, should have died here with the others in 2077, but I got a second chance, 200 years to make it right, to tell their stories, to honor their sacrifice, and now that's done. Now I can finally rest. There's movement outside. Through the porthole, I can see shapes on the ice, people, heavily armed, wearing power armor, Brotherhood of Steel insignia. They've found the fleet after all these years, after all my warnings and precautions. They're here, and I'm too weak to stop them, too weak to warn them, too weak to do anything but watch. They're cutting through the hull. I can hear the plasma torches, smell the burning metal. They'll be inside within minutes. They'll find the bodies, find the logs, find the references to Poseidon, and then they'll search. They'll dive. They'll discover the silos, and they'll face a choice: destroy the weapons or claim them, prevent the next war or prepare for it. I don't know which they'll choose. I want to believe they'll make the right decision, that they'll recognize the danger, that they'll understand what nuclear weapons cost us. But I've seen the wasteland, seen the factions, seen how people fight over scraps of the old world's technology, power armor, laser weapons, computers. The Brotherhood hoards it all, claims it's for humanity's protection. But protection from what? From whom? From themselves? If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. They're through the hull. I can hear voices, footsteps in the corridor. They're moving methodically, checking each compartment, documenting what they find. Professional, efficient. They'll reach the captain's quarters soon. Find me here. Find these recordings, and then they'll have a decision to make. Share the truth or bury it. Expose Poseidon or exploit it. Save the wasteland or condemn it. I've left them clues, hidden messages in the logs, warnings buried in technical data, moral arguments woven through the historical narrative, everything I could think of to push them toward the right choice. But I can't control what they do, can't force their hand. I can only hope. Hope that my 200 years of work meant something. Hope that the dead fleet's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Hope that humanity learned something from the Great War beyond how to kill each other more efficiently. The door is opening. I can see the light, hear the voices clearer now. They're calling out, checking for survivors. Funny, after 200 years, I'm still a survivor, still the one who lived while everyone else died, still carrying guilt I can never put down, still wondering if I made the right choices, if I did enough, if any of it mattered. They see me, 3 soldiers in power armor, Brotherhood scribes. They're running forward, checking vitals, calling for medical support. They think they can save me. They don't understand. I don't want to be saved. I've been saved before. It didn't help, didn't change anything, just prolonged the guilt, extended the burden, gave me more time to remember what I'd lost. One of them is reading my rank insignia, Lieutenant Commander. He's confused. The uniforms are pre-war. The body should be frozen, should be dead, should have been dead for 2 centuries. But I'm warm, fresh, dying but not dead yet. He's asking questions. Who am I? How did I survive? What happened here? So many questions, all the wrong questions. The right question is simple. What are you going to do with what you find here? I'm trying to speak, warn them, tell them about Poseidon, but my voice won't work. Radiation has destroyed my throat, my lungs. I can't form words, can't make sounds. I'm dying silently while they try to save me, while they pump me full of radaway and stimpaks that won't help because the damage is too deep, too complete, too final. One of the scribes found my holotape, this recording. He's loading it into a player. They're going to hear everything, the whole story, the truth about the dead fleet, the truth about Poseidon, the truth about 4,000 people who died while I slept and then lived while they remained frozen. They'll hear it all, and then they'll decide. Brotherhood protocol, chain of command, orders from above. They'll take the information back to their elders, their councils, their leadership, and those leaders will make choices that will shape the wasteland's future. I hope they choose wisely. I hope they understand what the old world's weapons cost us. I hope they're better than we were, smarter, more careful, more willing to let the past stay buried. But hope isn't enough. Hope never was. The Great War happened because people hoped their enemies would back down, hoped diplomacy would work, hoped mutual destruction would prevent destruction. Hope failed. Action matters. Choice matters. What we do with the knowledge we possess matters more than what we hope others will do. My vision is fading. The radiation is shutting down my brain, my organs, everything. This is it. This is how it ends. Not frozen like the crew, not preserved like the fleet, just dying. Finally dying, after 200 years of borrowed time, after 200 years of carrying ghosts. I'm finally joining them, finally becoming what I should have been. Another casualty, another name, another frozen face in the monument. To whoever finds this, to whoever hears this story. Remember the Great Lakes dead fleet. Remember the 4,000 sailors who died in the ice. Remember Captain Reeves and Lieutenant Davis and Petty Officer Richardson and all the others whose names are recorded in the ship's database. Remember that they tried, that they fought, that they faced the end of the world with courage. And remember Poseidon. Remember the choice you'll face, the power you'll discover, the weapons you'll find. Remember that we destroyed the world once with that power. Don't let it happen again. Be better than we were. Be wiser. Be more careful. Be the generation that breaks the cycle instead of repeating it. The dead fleet is yours now. Preserve it. Honor it. Learn from it. And when you're tempted to use what you find here, when the power seems too useful to ignore, remember this. We had all the power in the world, all the weapons, all the technology, all the capability, and we used it to destroy everything we'd built. Power didn't save us. It killed us. Don't make the same mistake. This is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, U.S. Resolute, Great Lakes Dead Fleet, final entry, final warning, final plea. 217 years after the world ended, 217 years too late to change what happened. But maybe, just maybe, not too late to prevent it from happening again. The Brotherhood soldiers are still working, still trying, still hoping they can save one more person from the wasteland's grip. They're good people, dedicated, professional. They remind me of my crew, of the sailors who stayed at their posts while the world froze around them. Maybe there's hope after all. Maybe humanity isn't doomed to repeat its mistakes. Maybe these soldiers, these scribes, these witnesses to the dead fleet's testimony, maybe they'll be the ones who finally break the cycle. Or maybe they won't. Maybe I'm just another old man dying with impossible dreams, another casualty clinging to hope because despair is too heavy to carry. But I've carried it this long, carried it for 200 years. I can carry it a little longer, until the end, until the darkness, until I finally join my crew in the frozen silence. The light is almost gone now. My heart is slowing. The world is fading, but I can still see them through the fading vision, through the dying light. I can see the frozen faces, the preserved crew, the dead fleet, my family, my burden and my blessing. They're waiting for me, have been waiting for 200 years, and now, finally, I'm coming home. Remember us. Remember what we tried to do. Remember what we died for. And remember what we're warning you about. The dead fleet isn't just history. It's prophecy. It's a warning carved in ice and steel and frozen flesh. Learn from it. Grow from it. Be better than we were. That's all I ask. That's all any of us ask. Just be better. Don't let our deaths, our sacrifice, our 200 years of frozen warning be for nothing. Make the wasteland better than the world we destroyed. Build something that lasts, something that doesn't end in fire and ice and 4,000 sailors dying in the darkness. This is Webb. Final transmission, end of log, end of story, end of